Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Who else wants to do it? Nobody?
Yeah, Pat, you're still on.
I think that's what happened last time. Yep.
Sorry, y'all, we have the B team today.
Oh, you're right.
Oh, don't sell yourself
I was
short.
gonna say.
Okay, we are live.
All right, so we can do a roll call. It's 12:02. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. Yes, we got quorum. All right, so we can start with roll call. Barry Del Cambry here.
David Smith here.
Emily Doran here.
Bobby Hempling here.
Pat Sheehan here.
Okay. Hey, Amber, quick question. Can they hear me okay through this mic? Do we know? With my mask on?
Me? We were testing it earlier. It should be fine.
Okay.
If you speak really close.
The screen.
I'll just yell a lot, talk a lot louder than normal. Okay. So we'll just move on to public comments. If there's anyone wishing to address Rcdc for items not on the agenda, now is the time. Please limit all comments to 3 minutes.
There are no public comments.
A rarity. Okay. All right, so moving on to the consent agenda. We need to approve the minutes from August 12th, I believe. Do we have a motion to approve?
1 second.
Motion to approve minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All right. So now we would move on to the regular agenda. This is closing public comments and everything else. Moving on, we have the discussion of possible action on the resolution approving the 2021-2022 budget for the Rollingwood Community Development Corp. This was the one we'd spoken about this, I believe, the last meeting and maybe the one before that, but it doesn't appear to have changed. We had some time to get some clarity on a couple of questions. So open it up to discussion. David, Emily, anyone else? Any other questions regarding the budget? You good?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
have a couple things up for
Okay.
discussion on the budget. I want to address again, taking a look at on the budget, on our cost share with the city. We are being, we RCDCs being, they're attributing right now, and I think this was kind of an estimation done a couple years ago, attributing approximately 20% of kind of city expenditures to RCDC, and kind of based on what we do in our activities, I'm a little concerned that 20% number is a little on the high side, given the amount of city resources that we use. I don't know I'm not confident that number is accurate. I think it's a little high, frankly, and kind of because of our mission, because of what we do as it's a type B community development corporation. I want to make sure that we are, well, first and foremost, I want to make sure that as a group we are paying our fair share of city staff time and city resources we use, but at the same time, I want to guard against us overpaying and inadvertently have a portion of our budget kind of rerouted for things that aren't necessarily directly economic development oriented. So I kind of want to have a discussion, and it may require a little more feedback from staff, because and this is kind of a little bit of a gut feel. I mean, I feel like that number is probably a little bit more accurate to a 10% than a 20%, but I above else want to make sure that we are paying our fair share for city staff time and contributing to that. So I'm open to kind of Amber, what you and staff recommend. I'm also open to other thoughts from other members of RCDC.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It was, you know, kind of a best guess at that point in time, and it makes sense, I think, to reexamine it every year and make sure that, you know, the city's not doing too much or the RCDC's paying their share. We are happy to, examine that more closely and bring back the numbers. If you wanted to just either approve what's in front of you today, if you're not comfortable with that, maybe it's 10%, as you said, we can always amend the budget.
Yeah.
And I will commit to bringing, better numbers back to you at the next meeting.
Yeah, and that'd be great. I mean, I just, you know, above else, I want to be clear that, you know, I want us to pay our fair share. I just want to make sure that we're not paying more than our fair share such that, you know, part of what we're paying the city then essentially gets kind of reprogrammed for things that may not be economic development related or paying for city staff.
And that makes sense, and the city does not, I guess, request those funds from RCDC until the very end of the fiscal
Right.
year, so
So we have some time.
got plenty of
Yeah.
time to
Yeah.
changes.
I think my gut right now is to say, let's commit to, I mean, you know, when I look at staff time taken up by council, planning and zoning, adjustments, you know, kind of all, you know, park, all the other boards, I mean, I think we're kind of on the low end. So, I mean, kind of what my gut's saying is, let's go ahead and, you know, commit to a 10% number now, knowing that that can be amended.
Do we know what the total staff budget is?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, and so basically, it's in there, and so what essentially is, we know, so the things, the line items that we're paying for is, office rent. Is office rent just kind of an estimation of what rent for the
Upkeep,
space would
yeah.
be?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And then office rent, utilities, and then salaries, website software and hardware, 20% of the audit, and property and liability insurance, and then it's just attributed 20% payment from RCDC for all of those things. So,
I see the portion that we pay for the admin services agreement. Do we know?
I know, I was gonna say, do you know?
that may help.
They don't. There's, the other groups don't have the same cost sharing.
Right, they do not.
They do not. They're just, so,
It's because we're a separate entity.
That's
Like,
why.
we're not part of the city, like, actual, like, you know, core stuff, so we're our own
Right.
separate corp. So we basically are outsourcing our administrative and insurance fees and things to the city.
so those numbers are kind of the overall kind of city hall kind of operating budget, if you will.
So like, the extreme alternative would be for us to like build out a staff and pay a staff.
Right.
Versus,
Versus just using.
I'm sorry, to be able to. So this 20% is the office rent, for example, of 25.9, we're covering 20% of that. Okay, so that's the portion of it that we're
Yeah.
covering is 20.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, and kind of what I'm saying, Bobby, is, you know, I feel like,
We use, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one other thing, just before we move to like approving that, is on here, the park improvement project that we talked about, that has not, no action has been taken from the park. So are we removing that from the budget going forward to be approved, or what has been decided?
Should not be in the budget.
that should not be in the budget for this year. However, I think if we want to talk specifically about that 30,000, can't we bring it up during the financials, Amber?
Sure.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
yeah, because we're not quite done through the fiscal year.
The only
Right.
project that you all decided to continue to move forward on was the MOPAC legal
Yep.
expenses.
Okay, perfect,
Everything else
Great.
is a clean slate.
perfect.
Yeah, and we're still technically in this fiscal year.
It ends October,
It ends at, yeah,
Right.
October 1.
right?
Or September 30.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
Correct.
okay, thank you.
So just thinking through then the best way to do this, if we're actually gonna have, I mean, Amber, if you're going to provide us with more hardline details, I mean, does it administratively, I mean, would it be better to pay the city on an ongoing basis, like on a monthly, like invoice? I mean, that may be a lot of work. I'm just trying to think through if the intent is to make sure we pay our accurate fare. Like, for instance, last year with Milk and Cookies, I feel like we probably had a lot of administrative support. Previous years, maybe not. So how did you account for those variables?
I mean, it's a
and
good
I-
question. It's, you know, it depends on the complexion of the board and how, yeah, how active they are and, you know, what kind of projects they
Mhm.
want to do. But we're flexible. I mean, we'll just do our best guess. I mean, that's what a budget is just your best, and you can always go back and amend it.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of what I look at, Barry, is, you know, basically if you look at kind of the, you know, the average work week,
Yep.
you know, 40 hours, and then, you know, how much of that. how
Are they
many
doing a
hours
day of work for us, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's basically it. I'm just trying to, you know, like, to your point, make it as accurate as possible. If we're gonna go that route, then, I mean, what is the most accurate way to do it? Is it, I mean, 10%, 20%, 40%, 5%, it doesn't matter. It's an estimated percentage, right? So there needs, one thing we didn't have was a mechanism at the back end to make sure that we spent 10% or 20%.
Right.
So we didn't have like an audit of it. And maybe that's what's actually needed, was just an understanding of, that would actually help us with the adjustments. But for now, I mean, the city has to pay for next month with a commitment. This will also, depending on how this works, impact the city budget, because if we do 10%, then there's a 10% allocation that the city has to work through. And I apologize, but has the city approved their budget?
No, and this,
Okay.
they need a resolution from y'all to approve your budget. They approve your budget. So they're going to on Wednesday.
Okay, that's why that's right, that's why this
Yes.
needed to be moved up. Got it, okay,
40
so
times
if that's the case, then
52 weeks in a year?
so then, to me, that would make sense is essentially, if we wanted to basically do some forensic work on the back end, we could go for 10%, and then Amber, and maybe it's something RCDC pays for on an ongoing basis, but like an end of fiscal year audit of where we
I like that idea.
stand.
Yeah.
True it up at the
Yeah.
end of the year.
I like that.
Then come to RCDC with the request and the documentation.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think one way to do that, make it accurate, is, I mean, to the extent that it's convenient, easy for you guys to kind of track your time
Right.
on RCDC specific projects, because, you know, I was kind of looking and, you know, basically just assuming, and, you know, obviously, we're not gonna take up all the staff all the time, so it's gonna kind of be a little more ad hoc, but basically, it's, you know, if you wanna take 20%, and kind of, you know, take 40 hours a week, 52 weeks in a year, divide by 20, that'd be basically 416 hours over the course of the year of, you know, the city hall staff being, you know, kind of completely devoted to RCDC. And I think, you know, 200 is a little bit hours, or, yeah, it's a little more kind of, makes a little more sense to me.
Yeah.
But, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think Barry's idea of, you know, kind of setting an estimate and then truing it up at the end of the year makes sense.
What does our what does our agreement say, how it works
Good
out?
question.
Because that will have to be revised to be consistent with whatever is
Yeah.
decided. And city council would have to agree to it.
True. True. I don't have the administrative services agreement in front of me.
So what is it on, when it's red or when it's not red?
When it's red.
When it's red, okay. So what I was saying was that, this is just a budget process. We have an agreement between the board and the city that spells out how and how much is paid for services that the city provides. The statute says that the city can't provide any services for free, so they have to be compensated by the EDC.
Yep.
So, city council would have to agree to that change. This board just can't unilaterally make that change. And that agreement would have to be revised, consistent with however you decide to do that. So it's not as easy as just making a budgetary change, so everybody knows.
That's fair.
So does the, and what I can't recall is, does the administrative service agreement have that 20% number in it or
Yeah,
not?
and I don't know. That's what I was just asking.
Yeah, okay.
I can recall it. I don't think so.
I believe it was dollar amounts, Because it was a dollar amount based off an estimation of 20, yep,
You're right.
I do remember things.
I'm impressed. So then, so basically procedurally, what we need to do is take that document up at a subsequent meeting?
Yeah, so, yes, that's correct, because
Okay.
and city council would have to agree to it, and it's probably a binding agreement for how long? I mean, what's it say? I don't have it in front of me.
I do. I'm looking through it.
I believe it was 1 year.
Yeah, but it's also a little bit of a double-edged.
Additional one-year term, so it
Yep.
ended
Yep.
September 30th, 2020. And so it would end again September 30th, 2021.
Yep.
Okay,
So
so
it's
it's
time.
gonna
Yeah,
need to be.
it wasn't intentionally, because this was a 1-year run at it.
You know, that's typical one-year
Yeah,
term. I
year to
just
year.
didn't know when that one-year term,
Yeah.
you know, would begin or didn't begin.
Yeah, and I'd want to make sure that we do this, obviously, in conjunction with the knowledge of, you know, council, you know, with, you know, the provocation that, you know, I think it's going to be in the council's best interest and our best interest to make sure that, you know, we're not overpaying for stuff. Well, we're not overpaying such that, you know, RCDC dollars or type B tax revenues aren't kind of going back into the city budget and being used for things other than economic development.
So we'll need a resolution for this, then the city will take the resolution on Wednesday, when they look at the budget and have to renegotiate, they would have done this anyway. And
Well, they could, I mean, I'm gonna reiterate something that I always have to reiterate for all my boards and commissions for economic development corporations, is that city council approves your budget, and they could just refuse to approve what you change. I mean,
Yep.
that's literally the power that they have,
Sure.
so everybody knows.
Yeah.
So we can still move forward with the resolution knowing that it's
Subject to council approval.
subject to council approval, like
Yes.
everything else we've done
Yep,
for the past
absolutely.
eternity. So, David?
So I'll take a crack at this. So, let me get to the budget. Which page is the budget? I'm going off two sheets. Yeah, so what I would propose is adopting the budget as is with the following changing the administrative services agreement from 88,000 to 44,000. Subject to further input from staff and Barry's suggestion of putting in place a true-up at the end of the fiscal year and subsequent years.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, Emily. Warren?
Do we need to do a roll call here for the it's a budgetary, right, so?
Yes.
Barry O'Cambry, aye.
David Smith, aye.
Emily Doran, aye.
Bobby Hempling, aye.
Pat Sheehan, aye.
All right, our pending council resolution has been approved. Moving on to the next item, discussion of possible action regarding a joint meeting with the Comprehensive Plan Strike Force regarding commercial corridor and what they are considering to incentivize businesses to come to Rollingwood. I want to start that just quickly, just a brief question. David, you are our liaison between the Comprehensive Plan Strike Force.
Okay.
So can you at least expand on what, if any, incentives they are looking at?
Right now, actively, not a lot.
Okay.
You know, most of the focus thus far, and that's why this is, you know, a timely, point in time for RCDC to have a joint meeting with the task forces. Most of what the task force has been looking at is essentially, really land use and kind of desired future conditions. And, you know, we've been talking a lot about, you know, barriers, zoning barriers and otherwise to redevelopment, the sort of redevelopment the city would like. But we haven't really talked, and we've also been talking some about mobility issues in and around and along the Bee Caves corridor. But there hasn't been a lot of discussion about incentives, about programs or anything else to encourage businesses to come to the business district in Rollingwood, et cetera. And, you know, just because that's kind of been more of my focus and less of the board. So
Yep.
One of the things that's happening today, so y'all know, is I think the draft of the plan is coming to the strike force members. We're all going to look at it, have an open meeting on that a week from today, and then hopefully to adopt the draft comprehensive plan. It is my understanding, talking with the chair, Tom Farrell, that our plan is that we're going to have another open house on that, where we're going to give the release of plan to the public with the encouragement for the citizens of Rollingwood to read and digest the comprehensive plan, have a open house on it, so we can solicit more public comment. Then it's going to go before planning and zoning, my understanding, and then before council, both for public hearings on it before it is finally adopted. So now's a good time to kind of get some input on whether or not we need to beef up, you know, any part of it, you know, economic development, particularly because there is quite a bit of work we've done,
Yep.
you know, talking about, discussing about the kind of the business district and ways to try to encourage redevelopment, primarily, but well, and there's little bits here and there about, okay, what do we do with the sign ordinance? What do we do with this, that, or the other? But I think it would be a really good point in time to have a joint meeting and get some additional input from this group on some of the things that are important to us that we're going to be talking about and looking at kind of moving forward.
So if that's the case, if you have a meeting coming up on Monday, then we need to meet with them prior to that, right?
Not necessarily prior to that, but you know, I think, you know, possibly we have that meeting on Monday, and then, you know, like a subsequent, you know, Monday, we have a joint meeting.
Okay, so, Amber, is this something that,
Because we've been
David
meeting,
or
we've been meeting every week.
That was,
so.
that was my question.
who would actually organize this, our liaison or city administrator?
We could organize it, yeah.
No. And Tom and I have discussed it,
Okay, great.
just so you know. And so Tom and I have discussed it, Tom's on board with it.
It's already kind of underway.
Yeah, and so it's just a matter of scheduling it, and if you want, Amber, it might be helpful for you and Tom and I to discuss the best timing for that, and kind of, I don't want to speak for Tom, my gut's kind of telling me to maybe, you know, kind of slide it in since we've been meeting on Mondays, not Monday next week, but Monday 2 weeks from today.
Following Monday,
Yeah.
okay.
So is that the last Monday in September?
Y'all will develop an agenda for that meeting?
Yeah, we'll do agenda jointly,
What time,
because it'll be a public meeting.
what time are those meetings?
Normally at 4.
Normally at 4
Okay.
AM.
Okay.
Sweet. Okay, so that's our next steps then, right? We will get a meeting scheduled between key players of the strike force and RCDC regarding possible action. Moving on to the next item, which is update, continued discussion regarding the RCDC participation in traffic and safety parking plan. This item was one that we had approved previously, and it was largely related to studying traffic flow in and around the park, and then to some degree, the business district. We were looking at another project at the time that subsequently was not passed at council, and that was, I think, one of our reasons to supporting this, so I believe now the discussion is
Do we
what to
continue?
do.
Yeah.
So, given that this was focused, and I don't even think this plan has even gone into operation, or like we haven't even started.
Yeah, I think it's been discussed notionally.
So, Is it just a matter of it falling off the funding agenda
Well-
at the end of this month?
And
Or-
part, yeah, and part of it, you know, I went back through a bunch of stuff to try to refresh my memory on kind of where this came from, but my recollection was that this is something that either council asked us to participate in as a cost share, or a council member asked us to participate in as a cost share, and it, you know, it would be, you know, and our thought, and Barry, your recollections jives with mine on this. My thought is, it's like, well, you know, we're looking at other things related to the park, we're looking at the commercial corridor. Yeah, it makes sense for us, you know, from an economic development standpoint to, you know, participate, you know, in this and get a good baseline of what's going on, you know, right now with traffic in and around as we look to potentially do kind of more economic development. I think, Barry, also, you mentioned, I think the need for this has fallen by the wayside.
Yeah.
The thing that would make sense, though, is if pending the meeting with the strike force, because I mentioned this, I think, last meeting, is it was clear that we needed to shift our focus to the commercial corridor. What is the traffic and mobility items that RCDC can fund and help over there in particular? Like, I'm fine with compartmentalizing the traffic safety situation for helping that, because to me, that does make sense from an RCDC standpoint.
I agree.
So I don't know if it's an amendment to this or what we do here, but
Well, and we can always bring it back up, because I think, you know, and you know, a lot of the traffic studies and everything else, since BK's is a state of Texas, TxDOT roadway, a lot of the traffic studies on that and whatnot are gonna be, you know, pretty much TxDOT driven. There's some things we will probably wanna take a look at in the future with regard to pedestrian and bike mobility.
well, that's exactly what I was thinking. How do we actually connect our citizens to our commercial corridor in a safe manner?
And I think that's a little bit kind of, you know, to be determined based on kind of what the scope, well, based on what the comprehensive plan says about that, A, and then also B, the kind of scope of it, and also whether or not, you know, we can potentially bring TxDOT to the table kicking and screaming, because at the end of the day, that's one of the things we're gonna need to get TxDOT to get actively involved in. You know, because I absolutely, you know, agree with you, Barry. I mean, there's a part of it that's pedestrian bike access kind of to those, you know, Bee Caves crossing points, but then, you know, in terms of, you know, safe pedestrians, safe crossings, and then also kind of safe, you know, mobility up and down, you know, TxDOT is gonna need to be a part of that, too. So, you know, I think this is one where, I mean, I think we can and should bring this concept back up, but once we get an idea of, okay, you know, what's the comprehensive plan gonna basically, what's the visual comprehensive plan gonna be looking forward, but then also what what can and should TxDOT's role be, if any, in what we're doing.
And it's, I mean, like to your point, just so I'm clear, it's to really, it will be dependent on what development or redevelopment opportunities come out of the strike force planning and zoning work, right?
Yeah.
So if that, like, for instance, if they reimagine or don't reimagine Bee Caves from a Rollingwood standpoint, like from the city of Rollingwood, then that really would depend on, that really dictates what we can or can't do from a access over there, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So we just strike it from the agenda for now?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, do we have to take any action on that, or can we just let it die for lack of action?
Yes.
Okay. All right, moving on to the last item, discussion of RCDC financials through July 2021. Which would be the treasurer.
Pat, you wanna give the financials?
Yeah, the total assets are $420,000, of which basically that's cash or receivables. The monthly income continues to click along, $13,000 in sales tax revenue for July. We have 2 months left, so you would think that our total today could be in the neighborhood of $152,000 in gross revenues.
stores.
Mail order.
Yeah.
What's the deal on the sales tax collection on Amazon? Did y'all,
They are destination sales tax,
so we're collecting that?
yes.
Yes, yeah.
I've noticed it on a lot more websites now too, that Rollingwood is,
Yeah.
we're actually popping up as a sub piece.
Yeah, and that's one thing, is my understanding that council and staff have had a lot of very good discussions with the comptroller's office.
Yeah.
And so my understanding is the comptroller's office has been, well, Texas State Comptroller's Office has been really responsive about getting accurate information, I think on a quarterly basis, kind of truing up, you know, what is coming to, what's being delivered to addresses in Rollingwood, like by online retailers like Amazon, et cetera. So at truing up what our sales tax collection should be based on that. But, you know, and I would, you know, as a public service announcement for anyone who ever looks at this, is basically when you can, if you're ordering something by mail to your house, put Rollingwood instead of Austin.
Okay.
And then,
We have almost $500,000 to spend for next year.
and then, Emily, did you want to talk about that
Yes,
$30,000
that
at this point?
30,000, so I guess two things that I wanna just discuss is, I guess I understand from previous RCD, members, and Pat, you might have more, better idea of this, there was a document that we sort of put together, that a committee member put together, it was sort of like a checklist of when someone brings forward an economic development idea, concept that they want us to work on or look at, that they kind of went through a process of sort of explaining the financial need for it. Am I explaining that
Yes.
properly?
Yes,
Can we reactivate that document?
yes.
Okay,
Let's, I will distribute that to you all so you can
Okay.
take a look
Okay.
at it, and I apologize, Emily, I knew I
No, you're
owed
fine.
that to
That-
you.
totally
But
fine.
the latest version I found was still kind of in draft form.
Okay,
So,
we can
opportunity for.
work on it,
feedback.
so, yeah.
Yes.
and I think that should just be across, no matter what committee comes to us, that sort of everyone fills out that paperwork as a starting
Also
point.
just give us background information.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, the way I understand it, and Amber, correct me if I'm wrong, is that I kinda asked the question of, when projects get submitted and they don't happen, is that the onus on an RCDC committee member to like follow up that committee and say, okay, it's the end of the fiscal year, you haven't used the funds, or you haven't put forth any plans to use the funds, and that comes back to us? Just, again, if that's something that the committee could do, or is that a city staff piece, and how do we wanna handle that moving forward? So like the big, I remember the first few meetings that Bobby and I were like, we don't understand all this stuff that's happening with the park. It was explained, but now none of that has happened. I get it, we've had COVID and the snowstorm and all the things, but where do we stand with that?
Well, really, we don't initiate projects.
Right,
Park Commission would be the one that initiate the project and come to
Right.
RCDC for funding and present it to us.
right,
And we look at it, and think, you know, it's a good idea or not. I mean, one time, 5 or 6 years ago, they wanted to put in a gong, where the kids could beat the gong over there in Little Park. And they thought it was a good idea, and we didn't,
yeah.
and we turned it down. So,
I guess, is there a term limit on the funds, right?
no,
Cannot
budget's just
imagine
budget.
that.
And they just, you know, just goes back in the pot.
Yeah.
I think what Emily's asking is kind of an accountability question.
Right.
That's a policy question for you all to set, you know, do you want to set up benchmarks or some sort of reporting process?
Well, I'm not trying to create more work, that's not what my
Yeah.
goal is at all. I'm just more of it's a checks and balances of,
Well-
okay, this project moved forward or it didn't, and to Pat's point, it just goes right back into the pot, that's fine, but
I think, so I'd like to see that form, but to me, despite, like, I know that we don't initiate project, it does make sense for us to basically look at things from like an ROI standpoint,
Yeah.
right? So like, we have our our basic 6 requirements, like even if it's like, hey, what is your estimation of
costs or.
you know, the estimate of benefits to the community, business impact, that kind of stuff. I mean, we need to figure out what that is, but we could take a look at the draft document that exists and then see if we need to add or subtract anything. So I think we should have that, because that'll just help us qualify the project,
Yeah.
first of all, whether or not even would come to us.
Can I ask the question, following up to what you were saying? is the park, like when we first got on this board, the park commission was asking for money for, you know, investment in the park. And as we've kind of rolled in with RCDC, and I have a better idea now, I think, of what kind of our charter is, much more so than 6 months ago. Why does RCDC support the park as a
By law.
Well, no, the law authorizes it,
Right.
Yeah.
but does not mandate it.
Right.
So it's a policy decision with respect to the use of the funds as to whether or not
Right.
these
Correct.
funds are utilized to
So
support the
that's why
park.
they come to us, because there's only so many places they can ask for money, and so we are one of the ones that are authorized to give money. Yeah. So that's why
Park improvements.
that's why we're here to, that's why they come here, quite honestly, because we have money and they need it.
Well, basically, our sales tax revenue is restricted
Yeah.
to certain items
Right.
that we get
Mhm.
by law.
Right.
Park improvements is one, economic development's the other. That's
Yeah.
really the two things that we get to do with that money.
Oh, so it's not just economic development, it is
No.
park
Parks,
improvement.
Part,
So,
there's
Yeah,
some-
yeah.
I'm going to give a high level answer to
Yeah.
that question. But the Texas Local Government Code dictates how these sales tax dollars may be utilized. And part of that is found in Chapter 501 of the Texas Local Government Code, which are Type A projects. And some are found in 504, which is also Type A projects, and 505, which is Type B specific. Generally speaking, Type A projects are primary job creation type of projects. You know, does it create a primary job? Does it put in place certain capital improvements, things of that nature? Type B, especially for a city the size of Rollingwood, has greater flexibility with respect to the use of those sales tax dollars. Open space park improvements is an authorized project under the statute. That's in Texas Local Government Code 505, Chapter 505. But the broader context is a project that's called projects for small municipalities under 20,000 in population. And that section in Chapter 505 says that a Type B corporation may spend the sales tax dollars on a project that promotes what does it say? Promotes or expands new or existing business enterprises.
Business price, yeah.
And I'll just read it. Let's see, this is 505, because I don't want to paraphrase. Yeah, I thought it was 158, I thought it was 158.
yeah.
Yeah, and so I always hesitate to say economic development, because if we really want to go back in history, these were originally created for industrial development.
Right.
And over time, the legislature has amended it and given different flexibility to different communities to do type projects. And they are economic development based, but you do have to find the very specific authority in the statute in order to spend the dollars. And again, one of them is for, you know, smaller communities such as Rollingwood, and now I'm having a hard time finding it. It should be right in there.
I mean, we're not obligated, we're
But you're not
allowed.
mandated, that's
We're
right. You
allowed,
can,
so that's why they come to us, because.
that's right. You can choose
Yeah.
those projects, but you have to have the authority to do it.
And the concept behind it is not M and O, right? But that it's
Right,
enhancements to the park that
yeah.
would potentially bring
So let me read it,
money to
because,
the city, which meaning, you know,
yeah.
that's how it has to flow.
So let's just read the two that were mentioned. So 505-158, projects related to business development in certain small municipalities. For a Type B corporation authorized to be created by a municipality with a population of 20,000 or less, project also includes land, buildings, equipment, facilities, expenditures, that's the broad one, right? Targeted infrastructure and improvements found by the corporation's board of directors to promote new or expanded business development. So to promote new or expanded business development, and those things that I just listed. The other one that is being discussed with respect to parks is 505-152, projects related to recreational or community facilities. For purposes of this chapter, project includes land, buildings, equipment, facilities, and improvements. Notice it doesn't say expenditures, right? found by the Board of Directors to be required or suitable for use for professional and amateur sports, including children's sports, athletic, entertainment, tourist, convention, and public park purposes and events, including stadiums, ballparks, auditoriums, amphitheaters, concert halls, parks and park facilities, open space improvements, museums, expedition facilities, and related store, restaurant concession, and automobile parking facilities, related area transportation facilities, and related road, streets, and water and sewer facilities, and other related improvements that enhance any of the items described by this section. And so those are the two that y'all mostly focus on, although there is authority to do other types of projects as well scattered throughout the statute. I hope that's somewhat helpful. Overview.
That's really helpful. One of the things I want to mention that I went and found is Texas Municipal League, which we're a member of, has a economic development handbook that they put out in 2020 that really drills down into, and you know, because I originally went and started reading through the statutes and the Texas Local Government Code, and you know, even as an attorney, reading statutes can get pretty dry and and boring. And the thing that's great about this Texas Municipal League Economic Development Handbook is it kind of puts everything and lays out everything a little bit more in layman's term, and also has a bunch of additional authorities that we could potentially use for economic development, business incentives, et cetera, that I didn't even necessarily know about. So one of the things I'm going to ask Amber and Ashley to do is, since we are members of TML, is to distribute the handbook to the RCDC members, just to have as a, you know, nice little kind of reference guide.
Yeah.
Well, as a desk reference.
Yep.
I mean, unless you want to,
Can you give us the Cliff Notes?
no,
No.
well, Cliff Notes are in there. But yeah, so that's a good resource. You know, kind of because Bobby, I agree with you. I mean, it's like, you know, kind of, you know, where should we be putting our money? Where should we be putting our time and efforts, and why?
And just, you mentioned TML. I don't know what it costs, but I think it's relatively low cost. But on Thursday, November 11th, Texas, they do an annual economic development conference. And this year it's November 11th and 12th. And it's a good conference, and I'm not just saying that because I'm the guy that talks about type A and type B corporations at that conference, but it's got a good broad overview of economic development activities.
Do you know if they're doing it in person this year or virtual or hybrid?
I think it's in person. This says, yeah, it looks like it's going to be in person this year.
Here in Austin?
Yeah, it's here in Austin.
That's nice. Yeah. Do they do it at their offices, or do they do it?
No, let's see. Well, last year was at Lost Pines. I think it's at Lost Pines again this year.
Okay.
Does RCDC get to pay for that?
And just let Ashley or me know if any of you would like to attend. We'd be happy to register you.
So here's the agenda. Glenn Hagar, who I went to law school, ironically. He's a Texas comptroller, and he's going to be giving the opening keynote address. There's a presentation, planning for your city's economic development, type A and B corporation development, corporations to city councils. I'm giving that presentation. Chapter 380, economic development agreements, is also a topic. Trends in economic development, that's all Thursday. And then Friday, speed networking, what's next for retail, economic development, and tourism. So it's always a very good conference. Some of it may or may not be relevant, but certainly it gives you a broader perspective with respect to economic development.
One of the questions I had, so looking at the balance sheet, so that 30,000 that we're talking about that we authorized, I think, almost just about a year ago. So if not spent by the end of the month, will that money automatically come back to us? Or do we have to pass some sort of resolution for that to come back to,
Well, we never wrote a check for it.
well, we haven't written a check for it,
But we
but
passed the resolution.
we passed a resolution is, and I guess a different way of saying that is, does our resolution authorizing that expenditure and saying we'll basically pay for it, does it expire automatically on September 30th, or is there some action we need to take?
There's no project tied to that. It's just a budget line item.
They did.
They gave us, they gave us a,
I remember.
it's, yeah, I mean, and
We're very close to M and O.
Yeah,
I
And I have to say,
tend to agree.
Yeah.
looking back on it, I think I would have maybe voted differently at the time.
Yeah.
As a new member, I kind of went with the flow, but it didn't look like
Yeah, there was a little, I
there
mean,
weren't
yeah.
any milk and cookies in there.
huh?
There weren't milk and cookies.
Well, I mean, and it was a lot, it was a lot of landscaping
Yeah.
stuff.
Mulch and-
Yeah, it's a lot of landscaping stuff, so.
Let me talk with Charlie and we'll see if we need to prepare something for your next meeting to officially kind of close the door on
Okay.
that project.
Okay.
And there was another outstanding project as well.
Okay.
Yeah, just so that we have a sort of, at the end of every
Mhm.
fiscal
Our
year,
comprehensive plan, we did that, so
Yeah.
we're good on that.
just, it would help us, right, to
Yes.
have sort of, just to understand,
Yes,
did the projects move forward or not?
you got it.
Yeah, I mean, because really and truly, I mean, it's gotten, I mean, it's pretty stale at this point. And I'm kind of with Bobby, I think we kind of a clear understanding of some stuff, and I kind of don't want to kind of have almost kind of a blank check, kind of just kind of sitting out there.
Yes.
I'd rather say, okay, okay, we're just gonna kind of,
I hear you.
not take that money back, but just basically,
Clean it up.
if there's a new project you want to do, or if you want to resubmit the same project, you need to come back and resubmit it because it's been a year since we've looked at it.
Give you an update
Yeah.
of where they
Right.
are on the project.
Right,
They've got it going or they're not.
right.
I don't know.
You got it.
Okay.
But to the best of your knowledge, they haven't bid out anything or taken any action or hired anyone.
I mean, they haven't bid out when they brought it to you, and then, I think the champions of that project dropped off of Park Commission and.
I see.
Okay.
Okay.
So, moving on, we need to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion in the meeting.
Wait,
Can I ask one more
actually, we also need to set our next meeting.
Can I ask one more
Yes,
question?
go ahead.
Just as far as mandates for the RCDC go, I don't know what historically what the balance sheet has looked like with RCDC. It's got $420 some odd thousand, I think, right now. What's the mandate on spending that money, and what's the expectation with the state government to say, hey, you can't just keep compiling cash in this thing? Is there kind of a direction on spending?
No, I mean, Charlie, not that I know of.
So we have historically spent more. This year with COVID and everything else, there wasn't too much that we were able to get going. So I think when I started here, Pat, you may know this better, I think we had around $230 maybe $1,000 in cash like 2 years ago.
So what were you spending it on?
Well,
We
So
spent,
some examples.
so we had this transition of like, we switched from the park to not the park, right? So that was a big expenditure shift that went away. That was $80,000 roughly. And then we had done some other, the block wall was,
Concrete blocks
Oh,
down
okay.
in Little Park
was
$100,000.
$100,000. So there's, again, but historically tied to the park. So
Gotcha. Okay.
as, what you've seen really the past 2 years is the transition from being like shifting the mindset from park supported to trying to focus on true, both sides of it, economic development and park. So,
well, and Bobby, you kind of raised a good question, because I mean, I think that's one of the things as a group to start looking at and focusing, and that was part of my initial effort to kind of both pull and then start digging into this TML Economic Development Handbook, because I think we should have kind of a discussion about the sort of things as a group we want to focus on, because one of the things I know that we've seen really over the last, kind of since Mirror Vista was developed, You know, when Mira Vista was originally developed, there were, you know, a few restaurants in one side of it, and we've seen those kind of shift from being restaurants to being, you know, sports medicine, plastic surgery. I mean, you know, away from restaurants and retail to services. So that, I think, has affected our tax proceeds. You know, one of the things I think has offset that to a degree is Amazon online purchasing, et cetera. But one of the things I think as a group, particularly dovetailing with the comprehensive plan, is looking at, you know, how do we encourage, incentivize, recruit, et cetera, the types of businesses, you know, in particular retail, restaurant, to come to our commercial corridor? How do we keep them there? You know, how do we foster that? So, and focusing on things that people in Rollingwood would like to go to, enjoy. And basically, because one of the things I've been preaching as part of the comprehensive plan is, look, you know, I think that there are, you know, some parts of, you know, some in Austin and some in the communities out to the west of us that would basically like BK's Road to be a drive-by, you know, commuter byway. And, you know, how do we get businesses there that we want to patronize, but also that, you know, people kind of driving up and down, slow down and patronize as well. And, you know, I mean, I've thought about all different kinds of angles, you know, whether we, I mean, because you look at some of the empty spaces up there, like at Mira Vista, and say, well, okay, you know, how would we, you know, what role could we play as a group in helping to try to get someone in there? And, you know, part of it is, you know, how best to, you know, integrate with the property manager there, with whoever the broker is, in an appropriate way, you know. And do we look at maybe, you know, hiring a part-time, you know, real estate professional who, you know, kind of works part-time for us and funding that to basically, someone who has a more finger on the pulse of what's going on, both in terms of businesses looking for space, but also spaces we either have available or upcoming, and kind of, you know, advising us that way. But also, at the same time, I think we need to get a better economic handle on, you know, the types of incentives, the types of things we can do to try to lure and attract and keep businesses here.
Yeah, I think the businesses you want are sales tax generating businesses.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, you're right, but it's also sales tax businesses that we want to be part of a commercial corridor, be proud of, and that people want to go visit too.
But you know, we've got, somebody said we've got plenty of banks, doctors,
Right.
lawyers, along BKs. We don't need
Right.
Yeah.
anymore
Right.
taking up space.
Yeah.
Sales tax revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think
We
it's
need
right
some
there.
more good restaurants.
Sure. or,
So we
you know,
should,
boutiques
we
or
can
whatever.
certainly,
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
we should add that to our next agenda. I mean, I think that's something we can talk through,
Yeah.
is like we talked about it a long time ago, but it's worth revisiting, is kind of that, what is our plan moving out of this? I mean,
Right.
out of, I don't know if we can call it out a pandemic, but like, what is our plan now, right? To your
Is it-
point, is it hiring someone like that? Is it some type of
Yeah.
incentive or
Yeah.
subsidy to help people hire people? Because that's a big challenge. I
Well,
mean,
it
there's
might
a
be
lot of,
interesting because we do have a lot of real estate, commercial real estate in, you know, people in our community. If maybe they come and do sort of a
We should put an item on the next
update.
agenda about.
Yeah.
yes.
Talk,
Well,
brainstorm, do this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also,
This is part of the master plan too, right?
Right.
Is identifying what
Right.
y'all wanna do.
Right.
And then we just
So-
wanna identify whatever that master plan is looking at, what do we wanna see as
Yep.
residents in
Right.
that.
I'm trying to remember how many of us were here when, you know, that we had a group called the Retail Coach
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was here.
come and do it. I think
Study, yeah.
the three of us were, I don't know that Emily and Bobby were here. But I mean, it also may be worth, you know, reaching out to the Retail Coach and having them come back and kind of say, okay, here's the study that we did, I think it's been 2 years ago now.
Yep.
And basically say, okay, let's go through it again and have an opportunity, you know, to ask questions, since we already had that study.
I think
in the
they
pipe.
also did economic development
Yeah,
Did.
as an addition to what they're studying.
that's right.
They also looked at zoning.
They're willing to,
They did
That's right.
zoning.
on a contractual basis, try to
Yeah.
steer,
Yeah.
identify the right type of business we want.
Yeah, yeah.
They'll try to find it and steer them in there.
Well, and they may be they may be the right vehicle to partner with. It may be, someone else that, and basically what my thought is, basically have someone kind of, available kind of on a contract basis
Yeah.
to kind of serve as kind of
Yeah.
a liaison,
Yeah.
/ advisor, because it becomes more cumbersome for, one of us or two of us to say, okay, well, we're gonna go, call the property manager at Mayor Vista and say, who are you looking for? How can we help? And then also, I mean, I like the idea of, some of the folks that are in commercial real estate in the community kind of, advising us a little bit, although I will say that, kind of from my perspective, they're going to have to be a little more cautious and a little bit
Sure.
more
Yeah.
kind of circumspect, so as to not to have any, appearance of any possible,
Sure.
conflict of
Yeah.
interest or anything else.
I get that. And I think it'd be interesting, like, post-pandemic, things may be different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just having maybe, I think a discussion from us as a group is great, but having the experts
Yeah.
talk us through what the future's gonna look like, and does that, from what we know from the strategic plan, is that a fit here?
So we can work with Amber on trying to getting Sue and can bring in for the next meeting and have them kind of,
Okay.
if nothing else, give us,
Good.
like you said, like, what is an outlook for,
Yeah.
what is our 2020, whatever next year is,
I
2022 outlook?
think it's actually
Yeah.
a really good idea, and go back over
Yeah.
that plan, because the plan that they did was, partially was used as a resource in informing kind of, where we were going with
Yeah.
the comprehensive plan, so it all fits together, and I think, the joint meeting is good, that is good, and kind of everything to kind of
Well,
feed
good
into
plan for
that.
next year.
Look forward, yeah.
All right. Can I have adjournment of meeting?
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
No, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
12:59.
Right on the nose. How do we turn this off?